Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for part one of our three-part webinar series on K-12 financial education requirements. My name is Raven Newberry, and I'm the Managing Director of Policy and Advocacy here at the National Endowment for Financial Education. So as we are building up to NEFI's 2024 Financial Education, Innovation, and Impact Summit, we have been highlighting and spotlighting important topics in the field of financial education. So with the continuing momentum around K-12 financial education requirements, we felt it was the perfect time to further explore this topic by featuring some experts and advocates across the country. So the topics we are covering include the passage of K-12 financial education requirement legislation, a case study from Ohio on a proposed funding mechanism for the state requirement, and finally highlighting some evaluation efforts from Utah and Nevada. So today's webinar focuses on passing legislation, and I'll go ahead and pass it over to NEFI's in-house expert on K-12 financial education requirement legislation, our Policy and Advocacy Manager, Emma Donahue, to further introduce the topic and moderate today's panel. Thank you all.
Thank you so much for everybody for joining us today to talk about this exciting topic. Before we get into our panelists, before we get into our panelists, we'll talk a little bit about this topic and the plan for today, and we'll get started. So K-12 financial literacy requirements have had a lot of momentum in the last couple of years. Currently, there are 23 states that have passed and signed legislation requiring personal finance courses for graduation. So far this year, we've had 6 states join that list, and there's still time for a couple more to be joining before the end of the year. For more information about the states that have passed requirements and the trends that we're seeing across these states, please check out the latest legislative review on nefi.org called Standalone and Flexible, a 2023 legislative review of K-12 financial education requirements. So with so many states joining this historic movement, we're going to talk to 2 experts today about the work that has gone into getting these requirements passed and how the implementation process is coming from those states that have passed. Before we get to our 2 panelists today, we're going to do 20 minutes of questions with our panelists and then leave 10 minutes at the end for audience questions. If you do have a question, please put it into the question and answer box, and we will get to it at the end. If we don't have time, we'll make sure we get those questions answered for you in a different way. And so to kick us off, we are going to talk to Leslie Finnan from CEE and Haley Crumley from Prosperity, Indiana. So Leslie, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, thanks, Emma, and thanks to NEFI for having me. I'm Leslie Finnan. I'm the Advocacy Director for the Council for Economic Education. CEE is a leader in K-12 financial and economic education. Our mission is to equip K-12 students with the tools and knowledge of personal finance and economics so they can make better decisions for themselves, their families, and their communities. We do that by providing teachers with high-quality resources and professional development, reaching over 40,000 teachers a year. We also run Invest in Girls, which teaches girls about personal finance and the financial world, showing them that they can have a career in finance, as well as the national economics and personal finance challenges, which are like the spelling bee of personal finance and economics. Finally, we work to advocate for all students to have access to economics and personal finance courses. Most of our advocacy work is through the FinEd 50 Coalition. We're thrilled to have NEFI as a member of that coalition, as well as several other corporate, nonprofit research partners. And we have seen immense success, as Emma said, this year, and we're excited to keep working to do that.
Great. And Hale, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Thank you. So my name is Hale Crumley, and I'm the Policy Manager at Prosperity, Indiana. So Prosperity, Indiana is the statewide association for community economic development here in Indiana. In other words, we are a membership-based organization, and we have nearly 200 members statewide, covering all 92 of our counties. Those members tend to be nonprofits, but lots of them are also local governments and banks, and even individuals, all with sort of the common goal of wanting to strengthen their communities. So what we do is really try and increase their capacity to do the great work that they're already doing. And I'm, of course, on the advocacy team for that effort. So we listen to what our members say are what, the needs that they're seeing in the communities, and we look for policy solutions. And then once we find them, we help pursue them. So we work at the state and federal level as well as administrative. And that's really how financial education came about for us. And I'm happy to talk about that more when we get there.
Great. Well, thank you so much, both of you, for joining us. I'm just going to stop sharing so that people can see everybody a little easier. So thank you all, everybody, for joining us today, and for Leslie and Hale. So we're going to kick off a question for both of you is, why do you think there has been so much momentum in passing financial literacy requirements, not just this year, but in the last couple of years?
I mean, I'll go on the national level. The facts speak for themselves. There's been some really high quality research, much of it done or supported by NEFI, that shows that personal finance works and has long-term impacts. And then once states got a hold of this, this data and got figured this out, other states saw the possibility. I know we saw in Indiana, we asked the legislator, why did you do this? And he said, because Florida did it first. So other states are seeing, states are seeing other states, and it's kind of a snowballing effect, which has been great. This is also one of the truly bipartisan bills out there. Democrats, Republicans, everyone supports kids having better access to personal finance. Every meeting that I've had with someone, they say, why don't we do this? That's kind of the big question. So I think there's been a light shown on the fact that everyone just kind of assumed this was happening, and it's not. So I think that's been a really, really good way to get this moving.
Yeah, I agree completely with that. It's very true that Senator Gaskill, who passed our legislation, was partly inspired by Florida, and he very openly says that. I think that's really common, at least in Indiana, that you'll hear, particularly any other red state, whatever policies they're doing, our legislators are paying attention to. So if you're advocating on this issue, try and point out some other states of your political color that have taken similar action. I think, though, that there has been so much momentum in passing financial literacy requirements lately, partially because legislators are just hearing over and over again from the organizations serving their constituents and their constituents themselves that things are rough out there, and people living in their states aren't fully equipped to deal with it. And I don't want to insinuate for even a second that financial literacy perfectly counteracts all of the financial difficulties that people are facing across the country, such as inflation, low wages, racial and gendered barriers to economic equality, all that stuff. I'm not saying you can financial literacy yourself out of poverty alone. But the way I see it is that financial literacy is a part of the foundation that states do have the power to do something about, something they can support through educational mandates, which will at least help people navigate their way to greater financial success. This was an argument that I personally used when lobbying for this legislation here in Indiana. And of course, we will make sure to come back to those legislators next session and say, okay, now here's what else you can do to help people be more financially stable. But to us, we really framed this as a first step. And we were able to actually utilize the unfortunate, difficult situations that many people are in to explain why we needed this law.
Great. That was a great way to start off. Okay, Leslie, we're gonna start another question for you. So on the national level, since CE works more across the nation, what makes the difference for a state that passes this legislation versus a state that does not?
Honestly, one of the biggest hurdles we've seen in a lot of states is the school community. The getting buy-in from the teachers and the administrators has really been the most difficult in a lot of states, especially in blue states, which are more union heavy. The teachers union can dictate something that does or does not pass. And I get it. Teachers and school administrators are overwhelmed. They're hesitant to have any new mandate foisted on them justifiably. So we've seen success in states where we've been able to get teachers to the table to actually work with us. We've seen broad coalitions supporting these bills, business groups, progressive policy groups, the chambers of commerce. Like I said, it's a really bipartisan issue. So once you get those communities to the table, and have everyone feel like they have some buy-in. That's been really helpful. But yeah, I mean, I think the status quo is really sticky, and especially in the education community, people are really scared of new things. And I think we've seen some success in showing that we're not just here to pass a bill and walk away. We are trying to support the states as if this bill does pass, or even if it doesn't, we're there. We're trying to do professional development support. We're trying to find them funding for supporting the teachers. We're providing them the resources and standards and all of that. We're trying to show that, you know, there's a huge community out there. Financial ed is one of the best supported things, subjects that teachers can teach, because there are a million courses, curricula, resources, all of that out there. So trying to show that has also been a really helpful tool.
Great. And is there anything specific that has been worked well with teachers so far to get them more on board?
I mean, bringing them to the table, and kind of, I think because of the momentum that we were talking about earlier, I think some of them are finally starting to see that this is going to happen, whether they come to the table or not. So being able to bring them to the table and say, we want you to be part of this. We want to build in protections for them. In legislation that we are working on in Pennsylvania, they wrote in specifically that teachers would not have to pay for professional development out of pocket, that teachers wouldn't lose a planning period. And these very common sense supports that we would have assumed were unspoken, to have them spoken has really helped the teachers feel like they are being heard and that they're not going to lose out on because of this legislation.
Great. It's great to hear. Hale, can you share more about the role of coalitions in passing Senate Bill 35 in Indiana, and what the process of the coalition building was like for you guys there?
Sure. So in Indiana, one of the leading groups to advocate for financial education in schools was a coalition that is called the Indiana Assets and Opportunity Network. This advocacy coalition is actually a program run by my organization, Prosperity Indiana, and its core priorities are financial empowerment, savings for the future, and public benefits and programs. So every year we are advocating and lobbying for various issues, all falling under those three buckets. So in other words, I convene this statewide group, which has a general membership that anyone can join. It's essentially an email listserv, as well as an elected steering committee that helps us decide what policies to pursue and does a bit of that extra legwork alongside me, because I'm just one person. So our steering committee had actually decided to pursue this issue about 8 years ago. So we'd been at it for a very long time before we were able to declare victory just this year. There were some years where we worked really actively on the issue and talked regularly with legislators about it. But there were also other years where we decided to focus on other issues because there were signs that the state legislature was just not willing to deal with the issue right now. So the lesson I think I would urge other state advocates to take away from that is that it is important to have a coalition. And I would add that it's important to have that coalition have a designated leader if possible. For us, you know, that was me, that was Prosperity Indiana. Coalitions are ideal mechanisms when it comes to passing any legislation. In my opinion, we have two others that work on different issues. The reason why is that passing laws can be long, hard work. And I say can, but it's pretty much it is always long and hard work. So sharing that burden is really important to ensure that your goal has longevity, and, you know, a real shot. It's also important to show legislators that any issue that you care about has broad and diverse support. I genuinely believe that it helped us to have, you know, a variety of organizations all saying the same message, you know, housing authorities, banks, AARP Indiana, universities, really just all on the same page that we need financial education in our schools. It ensured that we had consistency as well as constancy, and having that one group and that one organization kind of in charge of your coalition and responsible for a little bit of that recruitment also ensures unity, which is important when you start working with legislation, because when you get into the nitty-gritty of it, different alternatives will be proposed and things may start to split up. So you have to know where you stand, where your lines are, and a coalition with a designated leader is a great way to do that.
Great. Do you think there was one thing that shifted this year to get the legislation to pass, or is it just the cumulative effort of your organization and other groups talking about it for the last 8 years?
I like to think that 8 years had a big part in it. I definitely hope so. I think that we contributed to a groundswell essentially. But honestly, it's what Leslie said. It's the fact that other states are doing it. And that's just a little bit of Indiana's personality. Indiana is not usually a pioneer when it comes to any state policy. Our legislators like to see that someone else has done it first, and it has to be ideally someone else that they find relatable and comparable. So there is really no point in us here in Indiana saying, look at this policy that New York has and how cool it is, because New York is just so different from Indiana. But finally, states that were like us were starting to do it, or at least states that our legislators would like to be more like. And the fact that we could kind of show that to them, I think, was a really big deal. So obviously, you can't necessarily control what other states are doing, but if you know that other states that your state is comparable to, or that your legislators are interested in, have done it, point that out to them. Maybe they don't know yet. So I think that is definitely worth it.
Right. Leslie, CE has been supporting the implementation of K-12 requirements in many states. What is the biggest issue you would like to see included in future legislation?
I mean, the elephant in the room always is money. We would love for these requirements to come with funding. Unfunded mandate is kind of a, it's the thing. It's always, there are always words together. So we would love money for professional development and to really prepare the teachers and to show that the legislature understands that this is not an easy thing to do. So, money would always be great. If we can't get money, we also know that the standards are where this really comes down to. A requirement is nothing if the standards are so low that the kids won't be required to learn anything. So we are happy to go in and promote the national standards for personal finance education that CE and Jumpstart put together a few years ago. So trying to get states to adopt standards that are similar to that, or we are fine with them just taking it and slapping their logo on it and calling it theirs. We have no pride of ownership there, but high quality standards are important. But again, the teacher professional development is really, the teachers are the ones who are doing this, not the legislators. So we want to make sure that the teachers have all the preparation they can do. So legislative funding through the legislature would be amazing. I know that's really hard to do in most states. So, CE and FEI&I 50 are here to try to do what we can. FEI&I 50 is on track to train 1,000 teachers in some target states just this year, including Indiana, and in other states that have been passing or considering these bills. But yeah, if anyone could get us money, that would be great.
The always big issue in the room is who's going to pay for it at the end of the day.
Exactly. And that's a way to show the teachers that they're that someone is behind them too.
Right. And I'm sure, as states are bringing this on and the professional development is being provided, it might help. Do you think it'll help additional states come on if they see that the support is there for the teachers?
That's our hope. We're hoping that, through this year has just been so insane that's why FEI&I 50 is supporting teachers. And that's why people like our corporate partner of Visa is helping the funding of that. And, we're hoping that we can then take some of the teachers from the states where it has passed and said, look, we weren't on our own. We had a lot of support, and they can hopefully talk to, they talk across states. Teachers are very chatty. That's why they get into it. And so we're hoping that really becomes a part of the narrative, that other states are doing this, legislators are seeing it, but that educators also see that other states are doing this and it's not the end of the world. And so we hope that continues, but we'll keep pushing for money when we can.
Great. Okay, Hale. Prosperity in Indiana advocated for Senate Bill 35, which ultimately passed, and we're very excited about. What aspects of your work were most effective, and what recommendations do you have for other groups trying to pass this in their state?
Yeah, in passing our financial education legislation, Senate Bill 35, I have said that so many times in the last year. I think we were very fortunate to have found a bill author in the majority party who had personal interest in the issue. Definitely do that if you can. So Senator Mike Gaskill is a Republican. That's our majority party here in Indiana, from Pendleton, Indiana. So it helps that he wasn't in a big city. That's kind of the way our legislature works. And he is an insurance agent in his day job. So he just has interest in whether or not people are knowledgeable about things like their financial stability. So whenever possible, majority party and personal interest are key to having a legislator who's really going to champion your issue rather than just file a bill and, forget about it. And when you do have a bill that is alive and moving, I think it's really critical to work the committee. If you're a lobbyist or if you've ever advocated for other issues before, this concept is probably familiar to you. But for those that aren't, it essentially means finding out who is on the committee, the legislative committee, that would see this piece of legislation in the first place. Ultimately, two committees will have to see it, but if the bill's filed in the House, then you need to know about the House committee. And you want to make sure that they know who you are and why you care about this issue. It really means meeting with every single one of those legislators if you can, and making sure that they see your side of things before it's time to vote. That's important because you don't want the day that they vote to be the first time that they've dedicated meaningful thought to the issue. A lot of legislators, especially if it's a short session, can get really overwhelmed and will only get to preview certain issues just days before because it may not be something that they're that aware of. So don't let that happen. Find out who they are, get in touch with them as soon as possible. Don't assume that they already know. And when you do meet with these folks, bring data. CEE has some, the National Endowment for Financial Education has some too. I made a fact sheet specific with some Indiana info and whatnot, and that just, I think, sold really well over here. Something that I would recommend that we did not initially do over here in Indiana is to connect with your statewide teachers and schools associations as soon as possible. Much like Leslie was sort of getting at. Our bill's mandate was actually initially gutted in committee. So it was amended and the most important part was pulled out. Because the Statewide Teachers Association and the Schools Association, I believe it was the Small and Rural Schools Association, were completely understandably concerned about the added burden on teachers, as well as students, actually. I wasn't expecting that, but there was concern about the burden on students when it comes to preparing and scheduling the class. Fortunately, we were able to come to the conclusion that this was just too necessary to not do, and legislators were able to find a compromise by allowing for a flexible credit option for the mandated course. So it is being mandated, but they will at least earn some course credit for it, and our Department of Education can decide if that goes towards math or economics or really something else. And the idea also is that there may be even the option. So if a student just happens to need a math one, then it can go to that, if that makes sense. So that compromise, I think, was really important to getting us on the same page with teachers and schools. But if we were to do it all over again, the first thing I would do this time is call those associations and ask to speak to their policy directors so that we could find consensus right away. Because we were really close to losing it all because of that one amendment, because there had been concerns raised. And then I'll also note that there was another concern also about it being an unfunded mandate, just like Leslie mentioned. Ultimately, it did not get assigned any money here in Indiana, and we really, really tried, but it's difficult. They're very strict with the budget over here. I'm very proud of their surplus. So it will come up. I am certain it will come up, and we tried our hardest, and unfortunately we were not able to succeed in getting teachers any money to do that implementation, which is why my organization, Prosperity Indiana, and our coalition, the Indiana Assets and Opportunity Network, has stepped up and started helping with some of these teacher trainings, doing some state level coordination with other nonprofits, because we want to still make sure that this implementation goes well. So that's kind of what I would say about the way it was passed here and recommendations I have off the top of my head.
Great. And we know every state has their own quirks, but it sounds like from both of you, getting to the teachers early is a great first step for anybody looking to move this legislation forward.
And
I would
also
add
the administrators,
sorry.
the superintendents seem to be, as someone who used to work for the superintendents, I will out myself. They are very hesitant and very powerful. And so they are definitely someone you should go to when you're going to the teachers as well.
I was just going to add that know your state's quirks. You're totally right, Emma. Every state is different and has quirks. And if you're not aware of what those are, maybe speak to somebody who works in policy advocacy, a little bit more than you do, because you're going to want to know before it hits you. Something can get derailed really quickly from a tiny little quirk. Great.
We're going to move over to some audience questions now. Thank you, everybody who is sending in questions for our panelists. So we are going to start with, especially in smaller schools, the reality is that it is really difficult to fit in another course. Physical space, time, schedules. Please discuss, if possible, successes in integrating financial literacy into existing instructional streams and requirements.
Hale kind of addressed some of that, where some of the states, we've seen states kind of go two directions, and a lot of states are going in the way that this is a required one semester course, but it can fit in where a school district or a school or a kid sees as necessary. Like Hale was saying, it could be a math requirement, it could be a social studies requirement. So it's not adding something new necessarily, it's potentially replacing something. In a smaller school, you see a teacher who's already teaching something similar and can kind of drop one semester of what they were teaching and adding in this. Other states where we have some strong state level support, like in North Carolina, CEE's affiliate council there looked through their entire high school curriculum. Somehow she knew what they taught in the required history classes and rearranged the entire curriculum so they only needed 1.5 years of history, of US history, and built herself her own course that took a lot of deep knowledge of the state. But if there are people who have that kind of knowledge, you can also try to rework the entire curriculum so it's not additive to the schools, especially the small schools. I know it's hard. You're already stretched to the limit. And so, trying to be as flexible as possible would be my recommendation.
If I could add to that, I see specifically that you had asked about integrating into other courses, and I just want to say that we actually did have an experience like that here in Indiana. So essentially, we already had in our state code that technically financial education had to be integrated into really anywhere a school wanted to fit it, or a school district, or however that works. But it had to be integrated sometime between 6th grade and 12th grade. And it would just be partial throughout time. And I believe that, this is probably wrong, but I believe that law was updated in maybe 2006, something like that. And so what the advocates that I worked really closely with were saying is, we thought that would be good, but it ended up not being enough. So like I was mentioning earlier, my coalition has the general body membership that we get feedback from. It also has a steering committee, but even those people on the steering committee who are doing advocacy have been teaching financial education for decades in various forms, through universities, through nonprofit programs, etc. And what they were saying, like I said, is that even though we had passed that law in 2006, that it had to be integrated into other courses, there was no evidence that it was working, that it was having any impact at all. The people who were graduating still were not showing improvement compared to previous years, and people were still struggling a lot. So based on that, my personal recommendation is that it needs to be a standalone course, even if it's just one semester, And if you can get it to count for multiple credits, like I said, maybe a student shouldn't take calculus and they don't need to go up that high in the math level, but they switch it out for financial education or something like that. I encourage alternatives like that to make it work in your schedules, but I would really discourage just integrating it into existing courses. I think we've proven pretty strongly here in Indiana that it just wasn't enough.
Great, that's some great information. Next question. Do you know who, if anyone, will be tracking how effective different financial literacy education initiatives are in the long run? Is just-in-time education a concern for educators trying to find the right time in student schedule?
Well, for the first half of that, I know there's been a lot of really great work, especially at the University of Montana. Carly Urban and Christina Stoddard have been doing really high quality work showing that this does work. And I'm sure that they are not stopping with that one successful paper. So I'm sure they'll be continuing to look at the high level data of the long-term impacts of this. So there will definitely be more research on that. I'm sure NEFI is funding some of it. So keep watching NEFI.
I assume the Department of Education will be doing a little bit of this on some level, and some of that may just be anecdotal evidence that they get back from the teachers all over their states. So if you're really looking for that type of information, maybe reaching out to the DOEs of states that have already passed this, that have had it for a while. I imagine you would need to talk to states that have it around for at least 4 or 5 years before there'd be any answer they could give you, but that's the best thing I could share.
And there's some great states who've been doing it for a while, so there's definitely some out there to reach out to. Next question. This one's for Hale. Do you know if there is an Illinois version of the Indiana Assets and Opportunities Network?
That's a really interesting question. So in case this name sounds familiar to anyone, this Assets and Opportunity Network was actually a national program run by Prosperity Now, which used to have a different name, and they have no affiliation to my organization, Prosperity Indiana. Just a funny coincidence. We changed our name first. So, but it used to be a national network. So actually, there should be remnants of our type of coalition in a lot of states. Maybe not all 50, but a lot of them. I can't say for sure what it would be in Illinois or if it has changed its name, but I do actually work on, again, you may have heard of this possibly, the Midwest Asset Building Conference, which occurs every 2 years. So I'm on the planning committee for that, and I know some people in Illinois because of it. And I would really recommend getting in touch with maybe LISC Chicago on this issue, also the Economic Awareness Council. I don't know them super well, but I have been told that they are really the leader in this space, and it is a coalition type of group. So that may be the best example for you in Illinois.
Thank you. Here, another question for both of you as do either of you know of any state, current or past, that have funded a personal finance requirement, even if partially?
Yeah, there have been some. I know we've gotten some funding for teacher professional development in states like North Carolina, Michigan. The most interesting one is actually Washington State, that has funded personal finance education, but does not have a mandate. So they're trying the carrot rather than the stick approach. So they're funding they're giving incentives for schools to teach this rather than requiring it. But there are several states that at least have some funding. None of it is enough. There's never enough. But at least there's some funding that goes to places like our affiliate in the state to do the training. And I know Oklahoma used to have a tax on payday lenders that went to financial education. So there's some pretty creative ways that states have gotten some funding for these programs.
Hale, I don't know if you have anything to add to that. Yeah.
Unfortunately, not in Indiana yet.
Yeah, fortunately, Indiana. So kind of a broad question for both of you. In both of your opinions, is a semester a sufficient requirement, or should it be longer?
I think it's a great way to start. Is there enough content to teach in a year? Probably, but we're not going to let the enemy be the perfect of the good here. A one semester course has been shown in the research to be effective. And I think it's a great way to start. If we do this for a few years and the teachers are really itching to do more, then sure, they can do a whole year. We've had some states, I know in North Carolina, they have a year course that's half personal finance, half economics. And that's an amazing way to teach kids both, the big picture economic situation and also the smaller picture personal finance. But I think one semester for right now, that's the gold standard.
I would say that I would love for it to be longer. When we were talking about the bill that we had passed, it was based again on that previous language where we were allowing it to be integrated into the curriculum that existed. And back then they were just using the grades 6 through 12. That just happened to be what it was before, so that's what they reused this time. They didn't see a need to change it. And we did have some concern pop up about that. Is it too late to be doing this one semester course with a 12th grader? Because they may have already had their first job and started, adopting different financial habits. But we also were having concerns of, well, what if schools just decide to do this one semester course with middle schoolers, these 6th graders? Is that way too early for them to have any concept of, how this is going to work out in the real world? I think both of those are valid concerns. My complicated dream that no one would ever legislate is that there would be one early on that's required, maybe a semester long, and then in like 2 or 3 years, there's another one that is required that's one semester long. I don't think any legislator would take me up on that, but I think one is a great start. No less than one was acceptable to our coalition in the end. We would have loved to have 1 year though, and spread out would have been cool too. Really, the more the merrier.
Great. And we got one last thing about public-private partnerships. I just want, if either of you want to highlight a public-private partnership that is working right now to support the professional development of teachers, now is a great time to highlight those groups.
I'll say the one that pops out is Washington State. Like I said, the strange funding before the requirement is the Financial Education Public-Private Partnership Program, FEP with too many P's. So Washington State is definitely the model for public-private partnerships there.
I think we have versions of it here in Indiana, maybe on a smaller scale, but for example, Indiana University is a public university and they have a really excellent financial education program. Phil Schumann is on my steering committee actually for the coalition that I mentioned, and he is offering a lot of their resources to help train teachers. So I would consider that a public-private partnership, using those essentially state-funded resources to train teachers to get this done.
There are also commissions, there are commissions in places like Tennessee and Kentucky that are kind of run through the treasurer's office, but funded through private donations. So states like those are good models. Sorry, Hale.
Yeah, well, I was actually going to say something really similar, so I'll change it a little bit. But our secretary and treasurer, they are doing sort of a funded partnership with nonprofits here in Indiana, so that the nonprofits can provide that teacher training. But that money is coming from the state through these like tiny grant programs. So there is some of that as well, in particular, because some of these offices have obligations to make sure that people are protected as consumers, and so they can justify giving some money to train teachers so that people are more knowledgeable about financial products and so forth. So little grant programs may exist in your state as well.
Great. Thank you everyone for those great questions. If we did not get to your question, we will make sure that we get an answer to you or get your question to either Leslie or Hale to see if they can provide more information for you as we go forward. So I'm just going to wrap up some information on this today. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Hold on. I just want to, was obviously the first of 3 webinars that Raven highlighted at the beginning of this session. Hopefully I can have you both, everybody join us again tomorrow, same time, same location, to talk about the K-12 requirements in Ohio, a case study, and then again on November 9th, same time, same place, to talk about evaluations in these requirements. So I want to thank again Leslie and Hale for joining us today and offering some great insight to everything we are talking about today. And is there any last things you would, either Leslie or Hale, would like to highlight before we sign off?
If you are in any way a state advocate working on this in your state and you want some more tips, I'd be happy to have a brief Zoom call with you and try and talk about, what happened here, what I might recommend for your situation. I am a registered lobbyist and I work on a ton of other issues, so I am gaining that experience, and I would be happy to help anybody. I think we were so glad when this happened here, and we want to share the excitement.
And similarly, we're also here to help from a national perspective. So I put my email in the chat, but please feel free to reach out to me. And I'm happy to talk, especially the group of 8th graders. Please shoot me an email. I would love to talk to you. We love kids, and getting kids involved in advocacy is a dream. So yeah, get in touch. We're happy to support. And then I think, this is a thing that's moving. So we'd love to make every bill as high quality as we can.
Great. Well, for more information about the work that NEPI has been doing on this issue and any others, please check us out at nepi.org. If you're looking for any of the contact information for our presenters today, we're happy to also provide that, and we'll get that information out. And thank you, everybody, for joining us for our first of 3 webinars this week, and we hope to see you tomorrow and Thursday. And with that, thank you so much, and you have a great rest of your day.